Okay, today we are talking segmented mold casting versus 3D printing, or along with 3D printing. Whatever you want to do, you can do it. And today I'm going to show you how to use these cool little Ptownsubbie molds and what your alternative is if you don't want to use these. So let's jump right in. There's two things you can do to make one of these. You can either buy a 3D printer and get a file and print it, super easy, not super expensive, but a little pricier. Or you can get a Ptownsubbie segmented mold like this and cast with a Alumilite resin and make these. Now, why would you want to do one over the other? There are some pros and cons with both casting in this mold and 3D printing, so let's jump right into the pros and cons of a 3D printer. Pro, they are pretty easy to use. You buy it, put in a couple screws generally, and assemble the thing, and plug it in, and you're ready to go, usually within 30 minutes or less. Files, there are files out there that guys have created, awesome people that make these files and share them, so you could just upload them and print them if you don't want to design your own. Another pro is the plastic, the PLA. You can get it in a lot of colors, but not all colors, and it's relatively inexpensive. A big spool like this is 20 bucks, and I don't know how many of these you can get out of it, but it's a lot. Now the cons of a 3D printer. One con that is my biggest con is they constantly require maintenance. And I don't mean big maintenance, I mean you have to level the bed and clean the nozzle every so often and clean the bed and like re-tackify it. And I tend to be one of those who wants to turn it on and walk away and never touch it again, so it doesn't necessarily fit with my style, but even that being said, it works pretty well. Another con is the color options. Although there are a lot of colors, there are limited colors, because with resin, we can make any color we can imagine, so that makes me think these are limited. There may be, I don't know, 20 colors, there may be less. But with resin, I can make any color, so I'm kind of tending to lean that way. Now, moving on to the molds, the pros of the molds. One, they're available. You can order them from us at Turner's Warehouse or Ptownsubbie and maybe even other places I don't know yet, but they're available, they're easy to get. Another pro is they're relatively inexpensive, 25 bucks versus a 3D printer of a few hundred. You do have to get different sizes for different size pens, although some of the sizes, kind of like a Sierra mold, will work for a bunch of different pens, so that's a cool thing. Big pro of these molds is colors. You can mix any color of resin, including mica or dyed colors, which is what I'm totally after, and make a mold in any color. For example, this is antique copper caster's choice in a mold, which will look amazing. I can't get that in a spool, so that's a huge pro for me. The con is, once you have this mold, it's this design, so that's the one you gotta pour. So it'll be a little slower to get updated molds, whereas the machine, if you get good at a CAD or design program, you can design your own prints. Now, one other thing is when you cast this mold, you've got a set amount of time for the resin to cure and you can withdraw it. When you 3D print one of these, it can take hours. For example, this little guy here took over 2 hours, and if the machine should happen to mess up at any point, I've wasted that time. So that's kind of a thing. So that's the pros and cons. Although I'm sure there's more, let's get into how these molds work. First thing I'm going to show you is how to cast the mold to where you can pour the resin and assure that you get a nice even cast on it. All right, I'm going to put gloves on because this can be a little bit of a messy situation. And I broke the glove, but it's still fine. You'd think after putting on as many pairs of gloves for these castings that I would be good at it. But anyway, so I'm gonna pour my A into, I'm using Alumilite. I'm gonna pour my A and get enough for this mold. And I will put the amounts in the description of what you need. So I've got my A in here. I'm gonna go ahead and cast this in antique silver because this is one of my favorite Caster's Choice colors, and I have not made a segmented blank with it this way. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that in there. Again, platinum silver. And I'm gonna go ahead and mix that up. Get it fairly done. Now with my temperature here in the shop in Arizona, I've only got a few minutes to do this, so I'm gonna relatively quickly stir this and pour it and get it in the pot because I do not have any time to spare. All right. So I've got my part A and my part B in the cup. I'm mixing and mixing and mixing.
Okay.
Now, I'll just set that aside. So what I want to do first is pinch my cup so I get a nice little pour spout. And I'm gonna pour all over this blank on the flat spot here. And I wanna kind of fill up the sides about 3/4 of the way. I don't want it totally full because that'll make it harder to maneuver, and I'll show you why in just a sec. But I'm pouring that over, kind of covering the top, which isn't necessarily important, but it's just kind of what happens. And I'm watching those sides. Okay, that's about good. Now I'm going to try to tilt this so you can see it, but what I'm doing is flexing. I want to flex the mold and open up the gaps. This is why I'm wearing gloves, because your fingers are going to get a little resin on them. And you can see I'm kind of opening up the mold, flexing the gap, and I want to just kind of peek down in there and make sure that the resin has seeped into all the lines. Once I've done that, I'm going to put a little more on, right on the top, and you can add a little more. And I'm going to kind of do the same thing all over again. It's super easy, just twisting from corner to corner, from end to end, and side to side. And you can see really easily that the resin is in there. Now it's in there, I'm confident that it's in all of the little lines, and I'm going to fill this up to the top. And this is ready to go into the pressure pot. Nice and full, without overflowing, and I put it right on the mold rack here, and I'm ready to go in the pot. So I'm gonna pull this shelf out of the way here. This mold rack is probably my favorite thing in casting lately, thanks to Fred over at Ptown. Put that on there. Seal up this pot now. As always, pressure pots are very dangerous. Make sure you know what you're doing. Get training. Do not exceed or even come close to the limits. And I always start with the air turned off. I mean the air nozzle turned off on my pot. Fill it up nice and slow. I'm gonna go to 45 pounds on this pot. And now we wait. Now what I like to do is take my air hose. Now this isn't gonna totally eject it, but I like to just give it a little blast around all 4 corners, or all 4 sides, and just kind of free it up any way I can. Then what I do, now this is, I learned this straight from Fred at Ptownsubbie. He kind of did a thing. You kind of just, you know, rock it back and forth. Careful, because these edges can be sharp. So I kind of just rock it. I just push, I'm pushing in the bottom in the center here, and kind of just pushing and pushing and pushing. And basically what I'm trying to do at first, I'm not necessarily trying to pop it out yet. I'm trying to get all those little fingers, all these little parts in here to release from the resin. That is the hardest part. So once I've done that and I've kind of shaken it like this, kind of breaking it loose, then I'll try to start lifting it out of the mold. Now this is the hardest part about these molds, is getting them out, because they're not super easy. But you can see it's starting to lift up. It's starting to work. There, I just heard a pop. Hopefully that was a pop of the resin, not a pop of the mold coming out, because If you horse these and manhandle them too much, you will tear, oh, and I cut myself, see? They are sharp. You will tear the mold. So you gotta be kind of careful as you work these out. And you can see this is real time. Takes a couple minutes, but it's starting to lift. And I'm gonna go ahead and pop it with some air again. And maybe that doesn't do anything, I don't know, but it makes me feel like it's doing something. So you can see now it's starting to lift out. This isn't for an impatient person. So if you don't have the patience to work these, I don't recommend getting them. Okay, now you can see it's started to lift. And now I can kind of work it side to side and boom, it just kind of out of there. So check out this mold, a brilliant blue Caster's Choice mold. I could never get that in a PLA, so this is why. So I've got my platinum silver that I've stirred up here. I think the platinum silver is gonna look really nice with the blue. Great color. I've stirred this thoroughly. And now I'm gonna pour it in. Now, of course, when you're pouring these, you can pour multiple colors in the different compartments. It's so hot right now, and I'm using this Alumilite. I don't really have time to do that, and I don't wanna risk this not working. So I'm gonna go ahead and just pour it and fill up the cavities. The brilliant blue with the antique silver is one of my favorite colors, so I'm not worried about it looking bad. So I'm gonna fill that up pretty much to the top. It can kind of bubble, not bubble, but bow a little out the top. That doesn't hurt anything when you're doing one color. And then this will go on the shelf, and it's going right into the pressure pot. Blank is out of the pot. I like to trim it up. Even though this isn't PLA, it's Alumilite, it'll turn just fine. I like to trim it up just so I can see what I'm working with and where my drill needs to go when I am ready to use this block. I'll tell you one thing about using the molds with the Alumilite versus a PLA 3D printed is the cutting. It sure cuts nice, it's smooth, it actually cuts, whereas the PLA, when you cut it, it melts it and it's gummy and gooey, and it's not nearly as fun. But check out this blank. That is a sweet looking blank. We've got the brilliant blue Caster's Choice body or lines with the platinum silver segments. And that looks awesome. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it kind of gave you an insight on how these molds work. They are very easy to use. You just need to take a little time with them. They're not quick to pull out. That's the biggest thing. They're a little slow there, but other than that, quick to use, much less printing time, much less than printing time with a 3D printer. So if you want to check these out, we do have them available at Turner's Warehouse in a variety of sizes, and I will put a link below here so you can check that out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comment section and we will try and get to them. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe.